Well, let's go ahead and get started right now. Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Getting Started with ACL, Top Basic and Intermediate Techniques. My name is Jim Kaplan, founder of Auditnet, and with us today is my colleague and friend Rich Lanza, an ACL and audit software expert. This webinar represents a collaboration between Auditnet and AuditSoftware.net in delivering training series focusing on audit software. We're glad you could join us. I'll be moderating today's webinar. A little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. I'm the founder of Auditnet with a background as a Chief Audit Executive, Internet for Auditors pioneer, and an auditor who believes and promotes the use of technology for audit. The next slide provides you a bit of information about Auditnet. Before we proceed to today's material and introducing our presenter, Rich Lanza, I'd like to go through a few of the important housekeeping points. The webinar and its material are the property of Cash Recovery Partners and Auditnet. Unauthorized usage or recording of this webinar or any of its material is strictly forbidden. We are recording the webinar. You will receive a link to the recording as detailed on the slides that we sent out this morning. It'll be sent approximately 5 to 7 days after the conclusion of the webinar. Because this webinar does qualify for NASBA CPE, rules require us to ask polling questions during the webinar, and we will be sending CPE certificates to those who answer all of the polling questions. It's not critical that you answer the polling questions right, but you must answer all of the polling questions in order to receive the CPE. If you're joining us from a laptop or a tablet device that doesn't have access to the questions, to the polls when we launch them, please record your answers in a single email and send them to either Rich or myself. The CPE certificates and link to the recording will be sent to the email address you registered with in GoToWebinar. We're not responsible for delivery problems due to spam filters, attachment restrictions, or other controls in place for your email client. You can ask questions during the webinar via the chat box on your screen. We'll answer them either during or at the conclusion. After the webinar is over, you will also have an opportunity to provide feedback. Please complete the evaluation questionnaire to help us continuously improve our webinars. If GoToWebinar does stop working, you may need to close and restart. You can always dial in and listen along with the handouts that were sent to you. If you didn't receive the handouts, it's possible that you may have restrictions on receiving attachments in your email. The next slide provides you with some information about disclaimers. I'm not going to read that. Those were in the handouts, but basically the views expressed by the presenters do not necessarily represent the views, positions, or opinions of Auditnet or Cash Recovery Partners. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Rich and let him do the talking as he is our subject matter expert. So, Rich, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Jim, and thanks everyone for coming today. And you know, this is my bio. You can obviously take a look at it. I've used ACL for many years, and we'll be trying to show you in a couple of hours how you can get it started and do quite a bit of work with the product. From a learning objectives point of view, I didn't want to go through these in particular. I think the key is to say we're going to be walking you through how to get started with a review, how to request data, how to import the data, how to run every command, not every command, but practically every command in ACL. So you're going to get this overview of everything. And then we'll conclude with some sampling as well so that you can understand the sampling aspects of ACL as well. And along the way, I'm sure Jim said so, but I would say feel free to post questions. I try to look at the questions and provide any sort of feedback I can as we go along. And so with that said, let's start into the process of getting data analytics going. So when I look at ACL and any sort of analytic process that I'm going to be working with, the first thing I have to do is figure out what reports I want to run, because I find that that's much more valuable and important to then decide what data that I actually need to process going forward. Now, if I don't know what reports to run, it's hard to know the data, and otherwise I do walk into a IT extraction meeting or talking with the CIO, and I may just not sound as intelligent because I'm going to say, just give me all the data in accounts payable or give me all the data in general ledger, and that never really goes over well because they'll complain and say that it's too much data or you don't know what you want and etc. And they're right. So that's a key. Once we get the data, we obviously want to obtain it, validate it, normalize the data so that it makes more sense to us. Certain field names, such as let's say PVINV is a data field, but we might want to change that to invoice number because it just makes a lot more sense to anyone. Then any scripts we may have, we might need to edit them a little bit for the data we have, and then we run the reports. So going then to just giving you that overall, I think a key here is a data request. And what I tried to do here as I jump out of PowerPoint for just a second here and into the data files that we have, I wanted to note here that you're going to be getting links to a variety of data files as well as a link to go to Audit Software Videos. And Audit Software Videos has a lot more detailed comments, if you will, about some of the courses or about this course really, so that as we're going through, let's say, a join feature, I may spend about 10 minutes on it today or 15 minutes on it today, but we do have additional kind of supplementary training that you could kind of add on there. And I mention that because some people will look at this training today and say, boy, in 2 hours he went through a lot, and it's going to be hard for me to retain that. So we will have the video of the entire course that you're listening to right now up there, and we'll get you the link. We're also going to get you these data files so that you can play along, and we're going to start going into those data files. But then you also have some additional videos that you can watch to kind of further your learning that much more. So in taking a look at the data files, the April 10th data files in particular, this was from a webinar we gave back when, we have a accounts payable data request. And this accounts payable data request you can download, hopefully make use of yourself. And our goal with this is to essentially have an overall setting of which tables you need, such as invoice header, in this case invoice distribution, and supplier or vendor master file down here. And in addition to that, we have time frames that we're looking for, which right now I have as X's, but time frames, the actual fields that you'll want to extract. So, and this was based on reports, that we thought about that we wanted to run, and then we kind of came up with these. And then we have various notes below as to just, giving some guidance to the IT team. So for example, if it's more efficient to provide the entire file for certain files and we can extract what we want from it, that's okay, things of that nature. From a distribution point of view, that's actually where the accounts payable invoices are distributed to the general ledger. That's something where we also, can get that data file and the fields associated, again, with the vendor master with those fields. In addition to that, I always like to explain what type of data format I'd like to get, as well as the data structure of how it's kind of laid out. And down below here, how to verify some of that data and work on, from a verification point of view, what we can do is focus in on certain things that we could pull, such as like a sample invoice or a total of the invoice amount field or a record count, to kind of help us verify whether or not the data that we have is accurate and complete. Last but not least, how you can kind of get the data to us. So I try in one document, and I even have some other validation questions down here, but in one document, I try my best to go through every aspect of the extraction process. So that way there's almost like leaving nothing to chance from a discussion point of view. And then normally I would have a discussion with this document with the IT team. So it all kind of starts with that, and I wanted to give you that so that you had an example. From a validation point of view, and that goes to the questions that were in that Word document, they're a little more verbose in that Word document, so I'm just going to go to this slide because it's a little easier to work with. The slide itself walks through about 8 items that for accounts payable we feel are kind of good questions to ask. Do we have all the fields? is there one supplier record in the master file? Do we have multiples? Do we have one invoice record in the invoice file, or do we have multiples? Do the values make sense even? I mean, just from the point of view of is it $18 trillion, when we add it up, or is it something that is more reasonable, etc. And I think you could look through some of these other items there. I mean, some of the other funny, like scientific notation sometimes happens when you get Excel files from people. So I find I've done some things to kind of correct for that in Excel prior to bringing it over. But again, that would be another question. You might want to just take a look at the data. And what we normally do to look for scientific notation, by the way, is to look for the E+. So you just look for like E+, and that will identify scientific notation. The key here is to think about what can we do to kind of validate our data, make sure that the data is right, batch totals, maybe take an actual invoice and look at the data and make sure that that invoice matches up to the data. All of these things are just great kind of validation tests that you can perform. So at this point, I wanted to kind of quickly stop and do our first polling question, just to kind of get us in the mode of doing these polling questions. So let me launch that. And you should be seeing that polling question now. So what comes first in the data extraction process? So request data, set objectives for the audit, set report objectives, validate data. And these polling questions, as Jim said, you don't have to be completely accurate to get the points. So you just have to answer them. And we try to follow this, obviously, for giving out CPE. And while you are filling that out, I will take a look at the questions just to see if there's anything coming in. Again, I think a couple just on audio, and Jim's kind of handling that, so thank you. But if you do have any other questions that do come in, feel free to post them, and I can answer them for you. We try to keep this polling open for about a minute or minute and a half or so. So if you just want to fill that out. I know we have about 98% voted, so I think we're almost there. And so we'll just give you another couple of seconds here. Okay, so everyone's voted. Let me close that poll, share that poll, get it out there. You are correct. I mean, the majority is correct, right? Setting objectives for the audit is the main, kind of first step in that process. So let's continue on. So another thing I wanted to kind of talk through here, and these are using some files that you'll be getting from 101 ACL application data that we had. It's a book out there that I put out a few years back. And what I wanted to talk through is how do we import data now? So we've gotten our data. Again, this is the 2-hour session to ACL, right? So we're kind of quickly going through things. We've done the data request, and now we're kind of walking into getting data and importing that into ACL. So what I've kind of laid things out in this sort of format of what I like to get data in. ACL is going to turn data into a fixed length file ultimately. So a fixed length file, otherwise known as a flat file, has fields that are set. So the supplier number is 10 characters, the invoice number is 20 characters. It's a very kind of rigid sort of thing. Bear with me 1 second here. Let me just make sure you're seeing my screen here. Sorry. Then these are the 5 different file types. I like to focus on the fixed length, obviously. The tab and CSV or comma separated file, it can be more of a variable file set, as you're going to see. You see how the data kind of shifts around in that. Excel is also that way. A report file is more of literally a printed report that has various rows on it that can look kind of difficult, if you will, to import into a computer. but we'll show you how to do that. And PDF files also kind of follow the report file format, so we'll talk about them in them as well. But again, I'm listing this in more of a best case scenario to worst case scenario. So you see that, and in Excel, I would note that access files would probably be in that category of the Excel category as well. So just so you get that. Okay, so when we're defining data fields, as we'll do in a second here, you kind of want to just follow this little flowchart and first off say to yourself, is the field that I'm defining a date? If so, make it a date format. If not, do you add or subtract that field? Yes or no? And if you do, if you multiply it, add, subtract it, it has some sort of numeric value to it, then obviously that is a need to make that a numeric field. And I don't know if I'll be able to show you this example today, but there are two different versions of numeric data. One is where there are decimal places and one where there's not. And when there's not, you generally use the numeric format, and when there are, you use the print format. Most data has decimal places these days. I mean, I just find, but this really depends. So I work with a lot of JDE data, and JDE files actually don't, it's a numeric format. They're not an actual decimal place format. Okay, if you go through the date and the numeric version and you're left with what's left, that is basically character format, or otherwise known as ASCII or EBCDIC format. Okay, so we're pretty soon to kind of getting into ACL, but I just wanted to show you the data definition wizard is pretty good. I tend to use it for a lot of what I'm doing, but then I also kind of quickly sometimes revert back to manual and just manually define things. I like to define things with a reasonable length, so making sure that in essence we don't make things too long, because I find too it slows down the processing. I mean, if you have a lot of blank items in a field, blank characters in a field, there's no sense of really bringing that into ACL. You can define overlapping fields, which I'll try to show you, and then obviously set some date options and move on. So let me kind of now jump into ACL, and we will kind of get started here with the actual data files. Data files for this one, if it matters to you, is the April 10th data files. And you'll notice here we have like an Excel version, we have some kind of TXT versions, we have this report stuff up here. So there's a lot of different formats. I'm pretty sure almost all the data is the same data. It's just a matter of it's a different format. So okay, let's open up ACL, right? So now we're at this kind of blank screen of ACL, and we need to do something. And that, the kind of the next thing to do at this point is to create a new project. So to create a new project, I tend to go File, New Project, and just bear with me for 20 seconds here as I kind of find my way to the folder we're working in. Bear with me. Should only have to do this once, which is good, and I tend to bury stuff in here. Bear with me. Okay, and now that we're here, we can then do May 1st test import. And now that we're kind of in that folder, generally speaking, ACL will kind of move us there. So we have a few different options when we're bringing in data. We can get it from our hard drive disk, which is generally what you're going to do. You can get it through ODBC, which I'm not going to talk about today, but that's kind of accessing it through a kind of a direct access to a database. And then there's external definitions, which I have to say are going by the wayside a little bit, but I do find if you have an AS400 or a COBOL file, you can actually like open up what's known as an FDF file, or I think COBOL might even be called an FDF file as well, and you can then have it auto import your data. So these are a little bit more advanced, but actually usually make your job a lot easier, just so you know, because the data comes in defined when you're doing that. So moving a little bit onward here, let me just get to our first. This, again, we shouldn't have to do this over and over again, thankfully. So, okay, after I've done this, I'm now going to open up the fixed length text file. So let's take a look at, what is this file? It's kind of interesting. It's coming in as a print image report. I'm going to say other file format, for right now, but let's kind of see here. If I say print image format, it's another approach as well, but we'll just kind of say other. I usually select other file format at this point. And you can look at it as a fixed length, a variable length. Obviously, it's saying right now it's variable length, which is kind of interesting. So I may have to look at that file. But then we kind of skip to finish. So in skipping to finish, what we can do now is actually define the fields one by one. So what we can do is kind of highlight the fields that we want to define, such as, let's say, this large field here, and say that this is, let's just say, the supplier number. Because we're not going to be adding up this field, it's an ASCII field, and hence is a field that we're going to keep as ASCII. There are so many formats here because ACL has been around for so long that it really identifies with so many different data systems. What I find is most PC data, or all PC data, tends to come in as ASCII when it's a character. If you have an IBM mainframe, which a lot of people do, a lot of the data will come in as EBCDIC. So just so you know, and you'll kind of know the difference. So you can actually click here to change from ASCII to EBCDIC and backwards, and whenever you can read it, that's kind of the good way to So if I clicked on EBCDIC and you could read this data, that would obviously work. So right now it's ASCII data. We're going to set that to 18 characters, and that's our defined fixed field. So let me just kind of close that. And in doing this, what we essentially done. Let me just understand what's going on here. I'm looking at the data down below here, and it doesn't seem to go because I set it up as EBCDIC, sorry. So that's obviously will not come over. So now as I do that, we now have it in ASCII format, and you can see that this is a fixed length field that's set to that format. Now, other tables that you'll probably get, fixed length data does come normally out of SAP and other files, other systems kind of directly. But I do find another format type is just good old Excel. So let's kind of open up this Excel file. ACL automatically identifies it as an Excel file, so we'll click on that. There's two different tabs in there. We'll kind of go with this first one, and you have two options. I mean, you could say detect the type of field and length based on the first 100 records. So ACL is going to auto-define the file for you. The first 100 records works. I sometimes select the entire Excel worksheet, and a lot of times that will take a little bit more time to run, but I think it's more accurate. So in bringing in this data, let me try kind of bring in the first 100 records here. It's looking as though we have a blank table. So let me just kind of take a look at the actual data files. So one of the things that I wanted to do anyway, and I think this is a good time to show it, is I use a product called EditPad Pro, and there are other products out there such as Notepad that you can play with, but I find these a little bit easier on the entry point of bringing data files into ACL. And for example, we had that Excel file, which was kind of giving us a little bit of trouble, actually. Like I have this XLS file, looks good to me. I guess it is an XLS file. It's not an XLSX file. So let me try to resave that. But what I tend to do, quite frankly, is when I have an Excel file anyway, and I've done this for, I have to say, over 15 years as an approach. Sorry, in a way, but I will then save this file as a tab delimited file. And the reason I go with tab delimited, I mean, I could go with comma separated. That's another option, and that's another good option. But I normally go with tab delimited because let's not replace it. We'll call this maybe paid file tab in this case. The reason I do that is, one, I find sometimes the ACL Excel import tool gives me a little bit of trouble, and that's being honest. But at the same time, I do find that most people don't put tabs in their data. So it is something where, I mean, you do have instances where people put tabs in their data, and then that can kind of lead to issues. But let's kind of keep continuing this. Let me close Excel, and then open up that paid file tab delimited, which is right here. And I'm just going to drag it into my EditPad Pro. Now, EditPad Pro does cost a little bit of money. I think it's like $40 or something, but there are other products out there such as Notepad++, if I haven't said that already, that also can be a very useful tool. So what I've done is I've just set my options to like visualize spaces and show, get rid of word wrap, and you can kind of see the tabs right in here, and that's already been kind of set into the data. You can see the actual data in between, and it looks pretty good, right? So we kind of I feel much better about importing this one. So let me kind of import this, go to the disk, and we're going to open up that tab delimited paid file. Now ACL obviously provides the tab, none. You could go double quote, but I didn't see any double quotes in there. Double quotes would be sometimes placed in between the data sets. So you'll have like a tab, and then you'll have a double quote with the data, and then an ending double quote. In this case, we don't have that. I do want to use the first row as field names, so that will more or less kind of set that up like that. And now there's not much more I can really kind of say here. So do you want to okay, this is something that scares a lot of people, so I wanted to talk about this. An error has been detected on line, etc. I almost find in any data file that I import into ACL that I get this error, some sort of error that says, it doesn't like the data. This could be a blank date. It could be a number that has nothing in the number field. I mean, there's so many things that can kind of throw off this error checker that it's not worth really getting too worried about. You tend to just say, okay, and we're going to call this, paid file tab. So what this has done is now imported these fields in, and ACL's done an okay job, but it's already kind of figured out that the check number is numeric. And, well, I guess it is a number, but I want to make it an ASCII field because I'm never going to add up or subtract check numbers, and we'll keep just going through these. So this is another item, check amount. Well, debit memo code, sorry, I made it ASCII because it is a character. Check amount. You have two options here. They don't call it print and numeric. They call it numeric formatted, which is print, and then they have numeric unformatted, which is the numeric version. So these are numeric formatted, and notice they have a decimal place in the data, so that's good. The enter date is coming in as ASCII. I'm going to change that to date time, and I'm going to make it month, month, day, day, year, 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 year. Now notice how I followed the same input format as the data is listed here. Without continuing through all of this file, because I just really wanted to show you a numeric, a date, and a character field so that you can import those, you would then go through and obviously import and adjust all of the other ones to get to this final file. Now that you have this, we have a couple of fields here, the check amount and the enter date, that can be summarized on statistics, whatever you'd like. I'm going to run statistics on them quickly. But you notice that they are numeric fields now. They are date fields, and they work as such. Whereas the check number, if I try to run statistics on it, it doesn't work. It kind of comes up with other fields because it doesn't know what to do. So this is importing a tab delimited file, and if you imported a comma separated file, it would have the same impact or same import process. So looking back at these files here, what other files do we have? We talked about the fixed length. We talked about the delimited or tab delimited. We talked about Excel, and I kind of fell back to my old ways and said, it probably is easier at this point just to import a tab delimited version of the Excel file. And then as to the report files, which are a couple of them here, I wanted to open these up first in, bear with me. Okay, so these are these are the two. So this is report 1 and report 2. So notice how these report files, these are the sample files from ACL, notice how these files have a very kind of standard format, but it has headers at the top. And let me just, sorry here, if we just kind of scroll down, sometimes, yep, like those headers, notice how the headers repeat on various pages, and we want to get rid of that stuff, right? And we just want to focus on the details. Same is true with this other report file, except we have other information that's written up here that I really want to append down to each of the lines that are below, so that we actually have an ability to kind of append and organize the data that way. Okay, so now that we have the two lined up like that, let me go into ACL. Once again, I love using my EditPad Pro product because it just gives me a little bit more freedom in looking at the data. Let me just show you what I mean by that. In ACL, does a good job, not against ACL on this one, but let me open up report 2 first because it was a little simpler. It comes in as a print image file, obviously, and we hit OK. Now this is probably a bad example because it's a small data file, but kind of notice how I'm not sure if you're seeing everything in the file. It's something where it usually will kind of stop at a certain point. So if you had 1 million records that you're importing, you're not going to be able to drag down to 1 million. Whereas in the EditPad Pro, you could drag down to the 1 million records. So I just find it's a little bit more functional at times to work with. Okay, what ACL's done, and I'm going to let it do it for this one, is it's automatically figured out how to define the data. And it's kind of automatically figured out, hey, this is header, and and it's kind of interesting how it does it. So if I edit this record, I'm just going to go into that record and show you what is it doing. How does it know? The way it knows, and if anyone's ever played with a product called Monarch, this would be, you'll understand this very, very quickly. But with that said, what it's doing is it's kind of figuring out that the period mark starts at the 58th character. So you can see that 58 period mark. So that's right there. So what it's doing is saying every time you have a period mark at the 58th character, I want you to create that as a detail line item. And then we could define each of the fields one by one. Now that I know that that's the line number, it's going to ignore this other stuff at top and etc. So we'll hit the next button. We'll call it report 2. That's fine, and it imports the data. And again, now now we go through this process of changing the date. And note, actually, wow, it did a great job. It even figured out that that was a date, and that again, you follow the same format in the data, not the way you want to look at the data, how it is in the data. And again, keep going here, so we can then bring in that data. I'm going to show you one more of these because I want to show you, just quickly here a complex import process, just so you get an idea of it. With that said, I still feel the fixed length file is the best because you're able to get from the client exactly where the fields start and end, right? So there's no, what is the word for it? There's no mystery. With the other files that you get, such as like this paid tab delimited file that we were just talking about a second ago, it is generally more of a delimited file where it's variable where things go. So, it's something where like the check number starts here, but this amount field, this 0 over here, I believe it's the debit memo code, could be kind of shifted over a bit, ultimately, I guess maybe the best way to look at it is way over on the right-hand side here. You'll kind of see how some lines are longer and some lines are shorter, and it really depends on how much data is in there, and that's a delimited file. Whereas the fixed length file, you know exactly where everything is, so it's usually the easiest and best thing to import. Okay, so now that we're importing another report file here, I'm going to import now report.txt. Now, ACL did a great job of, again, figuring out that the detail line item that is set to, to be probably that period. So let me go into edit that record, and it did figure out that the period now starts at the 59th item. Okay. Now, what I can do, though, is if I want to carry this information down to below, so this whole thing here, if I want to carry that down, I can highlight the entire thing and say, yes, I do want to make this a new record. So this is something different than detail. It's not detail. And I'm going to call this field product class. And then when it asks me, how do I know that that's the call, that's a row that I need to select, I can say if you have the word product or phrase product class, and it starts at the fourth character, so you can kind of see, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, and it starts with product class, and I want to make that a header record. So that's a header item that is going to be written down to the detail lines down below. Now that you see that, you can kind of see how that header line is dragged down, and actually like the sporting good one here, right, I don't have everything. So I can go into sporting goods or into that item product class, and instead of the field width being 31, I'm going to make it 50. And notice how it kind of changes that. And for that matter, if any of these fields that ACL had auto-defined for you, you didn't like, you could go into advanced options and you can just fill it in there. But what I like to do is kind of drag down as far as I can to just make sure that the data looks appropriate and looks like we can, it's going to import it properly. Now that I've done that, I can hit the next button and we'll call it report. That's fine. And ta-da, it imported it. I am going to make that an ASCII. That's ASCII. But notice how the product class is now being written to these items, and then as you go below, you'll notice how it starts at the next product class when that one showed up in the report, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, trying to show you all of the different file types in just a few minutes here, but I do want to show you how, just by either going File, New Table, which is one way, or right-clicking anywhere in here and going New Table, it brings up this definition wizard, and it walks you through the process. And I mean, ACL is pretty good at figuring out what file it is and importing the file, knowing whether or not it's ASCII, FCIDIC, fixed length file. All these things kind of come out as part of the import process. So, okay, let's go to our second polling question here, which is what data table is easiest to import? Is it fixed length, tab delimited, Excel, Access, or another type of file? I do see most of you voting really quickly, so we do appreciate that. About 92% voted so far. If you do have some questions, feel free to post those questions. Obviously, I'm kind of sitting here. Yep, I don't see any questions coming through yet, so far I'm keeping you engaged, and hopefully you're understanding what I'm telling you so far, which is good. And what we're going to be doing next is kind of jumping into a variety of commands in ACL, which I also, I find fun because, once you get your data into ACL, it's usually pretty quick to do everything else. Okay, we'll just give that just another, 30 seconds or 20 seconds or so. All right, I'll just give you another couple of seconds here, and we will close that poll, share it with everybody. And absolutely right, yeah, fixed length files are the easiest to get in, aren't always the easiest to get from IT. I mean, I think I said before that SAP and Oracle and JDE, I mean, they store their data in fixed length files. So if you ever looked at the database, it tends to be a fixed length file. But the problem is whenever you export it for usage as an employee, they tend to give it to you as more of like a tab delimited or an Excel file, and so we kind of go back to what we were talking about today on how to convert those files over to something that's useful. All right. Well, moving onward, I wanted to kind of walk through the basic kind of analyzer tools, and I find that once you get your data in, you're more or less then thinking about how do I analyze using count and total and statistics, and we'll continue. Other things that we'll do here continuing on is the stratify using a break, and then stratifying to a table. So I wanted to kind of walk through, a variety of those analyze features so that, you had that under your belt. And then what we'll do is kind of jump into summarizing data and cross-tabbing data, but that, it'll be a little bit later here. So moving back to ACL, I had opened up another data set here, and this is the March 28th, 2012 course that we gave, and data files associated. So I'm working, in a lot of what we do today, we'll be working with this paid invoice file. It's 700 records. It's pretty small, but at least it gives you what you need in order to kind of get the job done for today, and that's really what I wanted to do is get you started. So this paid file, what I would then normally do is, after I imported it, and I think I did this just a minute or two ago, is I would go to the Analyze Statistics command, and I would select the variety of statistics. I think it's a good idea to hit standard deviation, might as well. And in the More buttons, let's just kind of look at what options are there. In the high to low, you could keep it as 5, or you might want to go to 10 as an example. And in the output, you do have some other options, but I'm just going to do it to my screen because it's just a little bit easier. Okay, so we're kind of looking at everything right now. Enter date, basically every numeric and date field that you can get your hands on, and then it's doing these calculations. So the invoice date field will, more or less kind of give you the top 10, lowest 10 and highest 10 items. It also gives you a bit of an average over here of a date. Tells you how many are positive dates and how many, if you just have like a blank date, it'll also tell you if it's blank. So you'll see here that, it goes from 1995 to 1997 when that book came out. And payment terms, there's some 60s and 30s, and the average is about 33. On the invoice amount side, obviously, and this is where we'll just kind of highlight this for a second here. On the invoice amount side, let's kind of take a look at this. Obviously, there's all the positive items, the negative items. The positive to negative items looks a bit reasonable, right? I mean, it's something where, you usually don't have that many negative items in your data, but you do tend to have a lot of positive items, so that makes sense. And from a dollars point of view, it's about $3 million. I guess that's right. We'll see. The highest item is $117,000. The lowest is a negative $50. So it gives you kind of that overall sense. Same thing with the pay dates and entry dates and such. So we've kind of done that. One of the things that I forgot to mention in the amount side, let me just go back up here to the invoice amount. I forgot to show you this, was the standard deviation. And what's kind of useful about this is that you could sit here and say, well, if the average is $4,444 and one standard deviation is 9,819, you could start to look for things that are above 3 standard deviations, right? And I'm just going to kind of estimate this rather quickly, but in essence, well, we probably could even do it exactly if we wanted to, but in essence, what we would do is say, let's take a look at invoice amounts that are greater than, excuse me one second here. Let's look at invoice amounts that are greater than about $32,000. So that, that would be about 3 standard deviations plus the average. So we'll kind of look at stuff that big. And as you'll notice, out of 729 items, there's only, well, we'll show you in a second, you kind of don't know yet, right? There's this question mark of 729, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, we don't really know. If you go to Analyze Count, what that'll do is not only count the records, but it'll count it with that filter, so it tells you, oh, there's 12 out of 729. So if you ever get in a situation where you don't know the count of something, like I did here, or you might even import a file and you have a big question mark because it's like a variable length file and it doesn't really know, what you can do is run the count, and that will tell you how many records are in the file. So, 12 out of 729, these are sort of the above average, really kind of weird stuff that you could take a look at. So we've gone through statistics, we've gone through count. Only other thing I could show you, from a kind of a simple point of view is total. and you will just hit the total, and that's total. It's nothing too major. There are some other commands in here, but I think, for right now, I'm not going to focus on them, such as like profile, is sort of like a limited version of statistics. I rather you just hit statistics, so it gives you everything. What I do want to do is walk into the Stratify command, because I find that's a much more useful item. And I'm even going to show you how we can kind of stratify using a script, and I'm going to give you the script, so it makes your life a lot easier. But it's something where I find that that's even sometimes more useful, if you will, than using this Stratify command itself. Wanted to show you or note something to you. Notice how the invoice amount is coming up with the minimum and maximum values already populated here. That doesn't always happen in ACL. So if you run a statistics prior to running a Stratify, what happens is that you create these variables. And notice here, this is new to 10.5 in ACL, so I think you need like the newest version of ACL to see this stuff. But the other way of seeing your variables is to go to Edit Variables. So that's another one. So what this does is it provides you with kind of mins and max items. And if you end up, what's kind of neat in my opinion is if you end up running, back to this here, sorry, back to the overview. And I'm just kind of clicking on these tabs down below here, so we went from variables back to overview. So if I end up running a statistics on the invoice amount field, once again, just quick, and then go Stratify on the invoice amount field, notice how the minimum and maximum are already populated, so that's useful. Then I can click on accumulate or subtotal the invoice amount field. I could put more in here, but I'll just do that. And then from a free, you could do intervals 10. So let me do that first, just so you see what it is, right? So what ACL does is it calculates 10 equal type intervals that it can work with. But let's not do that. So we'll go back, Stratify, invoice amount, and in the free section, why don't I put just a 0? All the negatives will show up. If you wanted to have a negative, I guess we could put in like negative 1,000 to see if there's any of those. 0, and then I'll do 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and million. And I like to use this logarithmic approach. It really kind of gives you a nice set of buckets to work within that, I mean, from my perspective, it's useful. I mean, I'll even go up to 1,000,000 here. It's something that it kind of fits to the numbers that I tend to work with. And it more logically kind of pulls together. You can then graph that if you wanted to, right? So you could click on the text or the graph. The graph below gives you a quicker, a little bit more of a visual sense of the sum of invoice amount and where your big money is. And it does look like a lot of it is in the 10 to 100,000 range, and then there are some of this other stuff out there. But okay, now that I've done that, that gives me a stratification of the data. I think it's really useful, helps you to do sampling, etc. You can filter on any of these items by clicking on them, and it will set the view filter, which I know we set before, to whatever you'd like it to be. Let me continue with this approach and now kind of show you how to stratify with a break. And stratifying with a break, allows you to, in essence, let me break the action. But before you do a break, okay, so let me think about this, how to best explain this. Notice how I'm going to break on the enterer. So I'm going to say I'm going to stratify data, but I'm going to do it for each person that is entering data into the system. So what I need to do in order to get this ready, is to go to Data, Sort, and I'm going to sort it on the enterer initials, and I'm going to do this to a file called sorted. Okay, so now I have that. Now notice the enterer initials are, FS, JC, they're all kind of lined up. Okay, now I'm going to stratify on invoice amount, free. Notice how, because in the sorted file I didn't run my statistics, I don't get my minimum and maximum. So just noting these things to you. Okay, and then I hit the OK button. That's my normal way of stratifying data. We're all used to that. Now, what I also can kind of show you is how we can, using this log feature, right? So this is the display of the final command, but that's all going to this log over here, right? So it's tracking everything we're doing. If I click on that Stratify item, or if I click on it here, it brings it up to my command line. If you don't see your command line, go to your Windows, Show Command Line, and it'll come up. Now that I have that here, I can click on this dialog box right over on the right-hand side. It's like way over on the right-hand side. And it brings me back to kind of where I was, right? So I don't have to retype all this stuff. And in the More button, I can break, and I can break on the Enterer field. So we can, break on the Enterer field. And now that I'm in a sorted file, it's going to work with the FS, then it's going to work with the JC, then it's going to work with et cetera, et cetera. So we'll hit the OK button. And now you'll see how things stratified by person, so and how they entered it. And again, this is another sort of useful way of using the Stratify command and making use of it. I'm going to go one step further, and I have this interesting looking script down here, right, that is going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm not going to go through it in detail today because I think it's just beyond what we're trying to get across. But what it's going to do is create a calculated field. So this is the key that will calculate what strata those items should be in based on the dollar, based on a stratification that's done, and it creates some fields. And what's nice about that is we're going to be able to then cross-tab on this information, and I'll show you why I'm doing all this in a second. So let me run this Stratify script, and it's going to say, well, what data file? And I'll click the paid invoice file, and from a which amount, we'll pick the invoice amount, and then the payment date, we'll pick the check date. Okay, so it ran this report, and it created the year-month strat file. So I have this interesting looking file now that has the Stratify range, even has kind of an order field. So you see here the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's kind of how that's laid out. So you have the Stratify order. Let me just get rid of that a little bit. And then we have the stratification that we talked about before. Now what it's doing, though, I've broken it not by the enter initials, but by the dates that are associated with the check date. So it's the year and the month that are being added together here. So, this might be useful in itself, right? Just to kind of look at it this way. But my opinion is this is really hard to look at, right? It's something where, you more or less need to scroll down this and try to make sense of it. So, some of the things that we could do at this point, if we wanted to, and I'll just kind of show you a simple sort of version of this, is we could summarize on the data, I guess, and we could summarize on the Stratify range. And in this case, we're going to accumulate the invoice amount 2, which you can notice is the actual invoice amount here. And that was after our script ran. And we'll do this to a file called sum. Now, the summarize command, which is in the analyze feature, you really should pre-sort your data. So you want to kind of make sure that that's selected. Otherwise, notice how we have all the pay years kind of set out here. It's going to summarize that 2, and then it's going to wait till later, and then it's going to find another 2, and it's not going to summarize it with this 2 up here because it's already it's already kind of unsorted at this point. So it needs, what you really need to do is ACL needs to sort it on that Stratify range first and then run it, and that's kind of what we're getting at here. Okay, so I'm going to hit the OK button. And that gives me, basically the stratification that we had before, right? It's nothing too dramatic or interesting or anything like that, but that's, what that gives you. Let me go back to the year-month strata. Now that I know how to summarize data, I'm going to cross-tabulate the data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the Stratify range as a or I could even do it pay month year. Let's just do it like this. And then I'll put the Stratify range into the columns. So this is otherwise known as a pivot table. For those that work with Excel, this is a pivot table, crosstab. The only difference in my mind is that it's going to not only crosstab it, but it's going to fix that crosstab. So it's not like a pivot table that it's kind of hard it's sometimes to work with, and the data is more of a dynamic data that you could double click into, etc. This is just going to be like a fixed report. You can include the count, which I'm not going to do right now. I'm going to do it in a second, but you can include the volume as well. But right now I just want to accumulate the value. I want to summarize it on the rows by pay year, and then have the stratify range at the top, and we'll call this cross sum for right now. Okay. Now, what I really like about this report, and I'm not sure I even like it in this version where it's by amount, but I really like it in more by count version, is you can really kind of see, over a time frame now, what months might be a larger month than a smaller month, but by kind of looking at the stratification over time. So you're like looking at it in two perspectives now. So it's a much more useful kind of way of looking at things. And the amounts, the problem, like the amounts are good. I mean, I think looking at dollar amounts or values is really good. I don't want to challenge that at all. However, I think sometimes to kind of go back to that original file, I'm going to go to my log, right, like we talked about, click on the cross tab like we did. I'm going to click on this dialog box, and in this case I'm going to like deselect that invoice amount field and just say include count. Don't even add up anything. I could do it together, but it makes it a little confusing for me sometimes. So now we have how many items are kind of showing up in each one of these categories, and this is a count of the items. So that's not going to actually help me. So let me go back to this stratification that we had. Bear with me. What I need to do is go back to my year-month stratification, and because I'm working with not the count of the original file, I actually need to accumulate this count field. So not run a count, because if I run the count of it, I'm just going to get how many like items are in each one of these categories, and there's only one in each one because we did a summary by year and by strata. So that makes sense, but that's not what I wanted. Now I can go back to my log here, hit cross tab, hit the dialog box, and instead of having that, what we can do in accumulating that, we're going to accumulate the count in this point. So that's okay. And once again, now you have an idea of where in particular years do you have a higher volume in certain months in certain strata. So you could kind of see here in that, and I remember like a couple of these strata had some really high values, so that's why, I mean, so you could see the volume that's like leading to that, and then you might want to look into like, yeah, why do we have such huge volume in a couple of months? So again, trying to give you many examples here of how you can cross-tab, how you could use Stratify, how you could combine the techniques of Stratify and cross-tab to really get some value out of it. The key here, though, is that we obviously want to make sure things are lined up or sorted before kind of analyzing it. So with that said, let's kind of jump over to our next polling question. And that is which command should be preceded by a sort or pre-sort command. First one is statistics, next one stratify, other one cross-tab, and last one age. And while you're doing that, I will look at our questions just to see if there's anything coming in. I don't see any questions coming in, on the whoa, wait, no, sorry, got one. Got it. So yeah, a couple of questions are coming in on importing data files. To be honest with you, the PDF import, one of the questions we had is the PDF import. I don't have an example that I can show today that isn't client data, and I just didn't want to do that without exposing the client. And I was looking at some of the sample data files that ACL provides, and what they provide is the report file. I will tell you that the PDF file, what ACL does, is it converts it over to a text report file, just like what we looked at. So when you work with a PDF file, you don't really work with a PDF file. The first thing it does is ACL converts it to a text file. So, what we were looking at was truly, a PDF file too, because it is like a report file. And the next question was kind of how we copied down. I'll do this again quickly. We'll just to kind of show how to copy down a product class field, the header record down. And I'll quickly show that when we get back here. So 100% of you have voted. Let me close that poll. Again, share that poll with everybody. Hopefully that'll come up. Okay, so which command requires a sort or a pre-sort? The statistic command does not. It actually just runs on the data. The stratify command normally does not, but if you want to break the stratify so that you want to do a break on enter initial or pay year or what have you, that's another one. The cross-tabulate feature is one that you do want to use the sort or pre-sort. So that's something where, because you sort of need to sort things together in order to summarize them, and ACL kind of needs to sort them. To be honest with you, like a lot of products out there don't really, let's say the word for it, they don't give you the freedom to decide whether or not you should pre-sort or not. It's something where it just kind of, happens. But let me just make sure here that you're viewing my screen. Nope, and you're not. So let me kind of get you to viewing my screen. Let me just hide that poll. Okay, so yeah, sorry, as you look here, the pre-sort option for the summarize command makes a lot of sense, because you kind of need to summarize things. Say this paid invoice file, you do need to kind of sort it before you summarize it. So if we're going to summarize on check number, if the check numbers are all over the place, it just, it won't summarize properly. Same with crosstab. And the stratify break, again, this is one where in the more option, you have that break option here. Okay. Now, just real quickly, kind of bringing in a new table, we're going to bring in that report file to show how to quickly copy down. And I will say, the videos that we have will allow you to go back and review this as well. So it is something that you're able to continue back with and kind of watch it until you feel more comfortable with it. The report files themselves, we had this one here that I believe had the header in it. And again, ACL automatically figured out that was the detail line. What you want to do though is then highlight. I'm going to highlight way out to here, and I'm going to say it is a new record, and I'm going to call this product class, and then I'm just going to highlight the product class section itself, and that will say that that is the actual field. But you do want it, it's not detail, it's a header that you're adding to the field to now carry that information down to the detail. Hit the OK button, hit the next, and yeah, I believe this will work here. So let me. And now you see that product class has been added downward to each of the detail lines. Okay, so sorry. Continuing on here, what I wanted to do is start talking about other commands that are within the Analyze feature, and then we're going to go into the data commands, which are more, I'll say like joins and extracts and exports and things, such of that. But let me kind of conclude here. Go back to this paid invoice file, and let's take a look at the gaps and the duplicates command. So these two right here. The gaps command, I use it a decent amount. I will tell you I don't use it as much as I probably should, but I think it's because a lot of times my client data does not really, it has lots of gaps in it. I don't know how else to say it. So you end up getting to the situation where you have quite a bit of gaps that you look at, and it leads to all these results that I don't know if it's that useful, quite frankly. But let me run a gap on check number. And if you did have a certain, let's say, another good one actually, I should say, is the transaction number or voucher number within a system. And I don't even know if I have that in this particular data set, but that would be something that would be kind of interesting to say, if that's our audit trail number, the transaction number, why do we have blanks and gaps and all these other things in there? Okay, I'm going to do, in this particular case though, a gap on check number, and I'm going to list the gap ranges, and you have some options here. I mean, you could put it to an ACL table. I'm going to do it to the screen just for now, but you could do it to table. And what it does is lists out the start, the end of the gap, and how many missing items are in between. I like this feature of it. I mean, there are other kind of options within the gaps, but I do like working on it this way. Also notice how ACL is pre-sorting that data. It gives you the ability to not pre-sort it if you really want to do things without pre-sorting it, but it does make, I think, more sense to pre-sort it. In the output section, we can go to a file and call this gaps or something, and pretty much like what you get is what we used to see here is now in a data file there. So there's nothing too dramatic there, but again, that's the gap command and hopefully useful for you. The duplicates command, there are two different options. There's fuzzy duplicates and there's duplicate duplicates. I'm not going to talk about fuzzy duplicates right now because I think it's a great command. I just feel as though it's something that is a little bit more beyond what we should be talking about today. What it does, though, in high level, is that it allows you to kind of set a difference percentage and also kind of a percentage of how big you want the result to be. And from a difference point of view, what you're really kind of looking for is like how many characters off is an item. So is it if I have 123 golf course drive and then I have 123 golf course DR, those two fields are off by 3 characters, the IVE at the end of golf course drive. So those are items that the fuzzy duplicates can work quite well on. But I want to kind of go back to the basic duplicates because that's interesting too. So in the duplicate command, you have what are you going to run your duplicates on, and what data fields do you want to have output. And there are some other more options here, such as you only want to work with the first this or next that, but we're not going to get into that right now. You have a few options. I mean, you can send it to an ASCII file. I don't know why you would. I generally go to an ACL file. We'll call it dupes. And just going back to our main section here, I wanted to show you in this field, what is this called? Field selection or selected fields dialog. It can get a little bit hard to work with. Like, I mean, one thing you might want to do is sort it by name. So that's one option. I a lot of times will sort it by how it looks in the data. So this is like the first row, that's the first field, that's the second field, that's the third field, and so on and so forth. So I find that sometimes is even a better, easier way to kind of look for the particular data. And just bear with me one sec. So what we'll do here is we'll, as to how to select it, let's do it by name because it is a little bit easier for what we're doing here. And I'll do it on invoice number, invoice date, and why not invoice amount. So we'll just throw that in there. Now from a list fields point of view, I'm actually, instead of doing it in numerical order, I am going to do it in more of this, like how it was laid out in the data file order. We already set up that back here we have that going to a file called dupes. And again, I'm duplicating on those 3 particular fields. I hit the OK button. Notice it's pre-sorting it first, just like summarize, just like crosstab. You got to pre-sort the file first in order to find the duplicates. And sure enough, we have these duplicates showing up, which are based on those 3 fields. Now, I want to note this for those that can't see the screen as well, due to the size. One thing you can do, it's just something you have to kind of do each time, is go into your font, which is the A and the A up here in your menu bar, and then select the data section and change it to say 12 or 14 or whatever you'd like, and then that will align or set the data itself. Okay, so you notice here though we have invoice number, date, and amount, and that they are all duplicated, and then it provides all the other kind of information associated with that particular invoice. What I do like about the dupes command and and others is the ability to, if you had, let's say, 100 fields in the file, right? So you have 100 of these fields. It isn't a bad thing then to just run a duplicate test on all 100. I mean, it is possible to do. And ACL will not break on you if you do it. Whereas you'll notice with other products that you'll use that sometimes can be an issue. So I kind of like the fact that it allows you to do that. All right. Continuing on here, I feel as though we've gone through the majority of key things that you'd want to run in the Analyze command toolbar. So I'm going to move off of the Analyze command toolbar and get into the data menu, toolbar here. So we have extracting data, exporting data, and which we'll talk about first. And then what I wanted to do before we get into joining data, which is sort of a little bit later down the road because I find that can be a little bit harder to work with. What I wanted to do is talk about the verify command and the search command, which I do find can be a really sort of useful feature that I think a lot of people don't realize exists sometimes. So I did want to kind of show you that as well. So with that said, the extract, we'll go data extract, and in this case here we have an ability to extract either record or fields. So one thing that could be useful for you in your extracting, like why would we extract data? One reason is to extract data if something's true. So you might want to say extract the record if the check date is greater than 1996-0101. So it's if anything's greater than 1996-0101. Now, it's a little hard to see this, and I can't blow it up, but if you notice the actual, single quote there is actually a backwards single quote, so it's not, it's next, it's on many keyboards, it's next to a key called the tilde, and it's to the right, it's to the left of the number 1 key on your keyboard. If you didn't want to remember all that, another way of doing this is just click date and time. And you could say, okay, yeah, sure, May 1st today, yeah, let's hit OK here. And it will put whatever date you want in there, right? And now you can go back in and change it to whatever you'd like. So if you don't want to remember where that key is, you can just do it this way. And now that I have the check date greater than that amount, that value, I can do this to a file called extracted, let's say. And now it pulled out 690 of the 729 records. So how do I know that? I go to my log and I can look at the extract. This is where the log gets useful, where you can start to kind of see like what's going on, and what happened was 39 records dropped off because they were in 1995. So, okay, that's good. Now, I'll just go one step further with the extract just to kind of show you what you could do. Let's say this data file was 4 gigabytes big, just say, and you decided, I'd like to be able to work with this file but not work with 4 gigabytes of data. What you can do is an extract, once again, and select the fields option. And let's say these are the only fields that you needed. Enter initial date, expected pay date, invoice amount, invoice number. That's probably good enough, that kind of thing. So you just kind of select the fields that you want. Another way to do it is to select the extract fields option, right? And that's another option. And we will, kind of extract only those fields to a new table called over 1996 and smaller, or something like that. And now we have this file, over 1996 and smaller. And if I go into my data files here, I mean, this is pretty logical stuff, right? I mean, it's not that difficult to understand this, but the actual file will be a lot less. So now you'll notice the extracted file is 116 character or kilobytes, which is over here. But now the over 1996 and smaller is 40 kilobytes. So it's about a third of what the original file size was, and is a much more usable file. Like this file will sort a lot quicker, it'll summarize a lot quicker, and again, if it was 2 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes big, you've now brought it down to like 1.5 gigabytes. So it's a lot better of a situation. Okay, so I wanted to show you that. Once from an extract point of view, as I've tried to show you here quickly, you could limit the fields. You could limit from an if statement point of view, so that's another option. Now that I have this data, let's say I want to export it. So we have the ability to export data. You have to either you select the view, which is the view here is what is on your screen. So you could say I want to export the view that's on my screen, or I want to extract these fields. And then you could click on, whatever fields you want. You could click on all of them, for that matter. That's fine. And there are a few options now. So you have Excel, which a lot of people do. So that's a good one. Why don't we even just send to that and just say, test Excel, right? Boom. So now, now we have in our folder, we have test Excel, and it's an Excel version of the data that we had in ACL. It's a little clunky looking, right? I mean, it's not beautifully formatted with, yellow and bold and everything's lined up beautifully and all that stuff, but it works, right? So that's the key here. It works. Okay. Let me go back. Sorry. So now that we're back to the data itself and exporting that, then other options we have from an export point of view, I'll just click on all those fields. Another one that I like, I mean, the one that comes up is text, which really is a fixed length file. We talked about creating a fixed length file, like that's what that is, and I'm not really a fan of that, for importing it, because it'd be a little bit harder to import that one. It takes time sometimes when and I don't even know why you'd be exporting data then import it back into ACL. So it's sort of, usually I have to say I'm almost never going to text files, right? So the two that I go, or three that I go to are Access is one, Excel, and then Delimited. And Delimited, you have a lot of options here. Like you have the ability to add quotes around every tab delimited item. We talked about tab delimited before. You could also add a comma. It's hard to see that, but that's a comma. And you could add a pipe. That's another one. You could, I believe you could add anything you want here. You could add a tilde and type in a tilde here. And then that would, separate the columns on a tilde. So let me do it based on that. And I'll kind of call this like tilde export. Okay. The one thing that confuses people on this part of it is that ACL puts a .del at the end of the file. So that's something where it gets a little confusing for some people to realize that that's a delimited file. So when you try to open this up in Excel, it usually, like, no one can see it, and so I normally will change that in my file manager to TXT. And now I have a file that, yeah, I mean, I can open it up in Excel as DEL. I don't want to say that I can't. But notice here, if you're hopefully getting more comfortable with importing data into ACL and such, you can really see here how we have those quotes, the tilde, the quotes, the tilde, the quotes, the tilde, and it is delimited because some rows have more data in it than other rows. But for the most part, we've kind of covered all bases here. So again, that's an exported file, delimited, from ACL. One last note on exporting data. It's, I'm spending a good amount of time on this one. Might as well explain this one. Is that if you do, export it to a delimited file, it takes a lot quicker than exporting it to Excel. And the reason for that is ACL, when it exports it to Excel, has to do a lot of thinking in order to get it into Excel's format. So it tends to, I really don't have valid statistics here, but I'm going to say it probably takes about 5 to 10 times longer to export a file to Excel than it does to a normal delimited file. So a lot of times I will just go to delimited because it's just a lot quicker. Okay, so we've gone through data extract and export. I'm not going to talk about crystal reports. It talks about how you can export data to a crystal report version. I have not used crystal reports. I don't have many people that use crystal reports, so I'm kind of jumping off that. Another option is to create an index of a file, and an index is like a sort of the file, but you're not really sorting the file. Let me just kind of, I don't use this very much. I will admit to you. So I normally sort a file and create a physical file. But what is nice about creating an index like check index is I have kind of, I have two options. I can go to none, where it's unsorted, or I can go to my check index now, and it sorts it by check index. But notice here, just in the files that we were playing with before, if you can see this, I believe we had at one point had sorted a file to a physical file, and that ultimately kind of created this file that we played with. That would be something that will actually create a physical file. So if we had the paid file, 123 kilobytes, if I go into that paid file, might as well just do it for you so you can see it, and I can sort that paid file and sort it on check number to a file called sorted. You can now see in your in here that we have a 123 kilobyte file called sorted. So like I said, if we have a 4 gigabyte file and you sort it, you now have 8 gigabytes of data on your hard drive. So that's not good. The index feature allows you to create a much smaller version of that sorted file. That's the INX file here, and that's an index that's used, and that essentially allows ACL to kind of index the particular file that we were working with. So I think we were working maybe with this paid file and maybe the sum file, maybe the extracted file. I think it was extracted. Anyway, okay, if I wanted to figure out like which file were we working with, I think it was this one here. A way to do that is to go back to your log, and just to kind of go back to the log. So this is a good lesson here. If we have this log here, what I can do is say, when did I create that index? I can go control find. I want to go up my log, and then we'll say index. And sure enough, there it is. Okay, set index to chat. Oh, okay, that's interesting. What file was I working with? It's the over 1996 file. And notice how all these commands were issued on that file there. So that, that's kind of how you can use your log if you want to get back to some of the original data that you were working with. Okay, so kind of continuing on here, I wanted to show you a couple of other commands that will allow you to kind of quickly find things in your data. Let me just try to think about something to search for. Let's say for some reason we were looking for invoice number 84976. So we're looking for 84976. One of the things, but you don't know where it is. One of the things you can do is you can say, locate if, and you could put in, find 84976. And notice how ACL will automatically go to that record, and then you could kind of see that over there, the 84976. Now another option is, let's say you had a file and it had 42 million records in it, and it's really kind of hard to scroll through to figure out where things are. Another thing that you can do in this case is you could do a search, and you could say locate record, and we don't have that many records, but we could say 500, locate record 500, and boom, it brings you right to record 500. So they're little points. I don't want to make a big deal about this, but it is kind of an interesting little tool to utilize if you're searching your data and you need to kind of quickly find things. One other command that can be useful, but I don't use it very much, is the verify command. I should use it more, I'll admit that. And what I'll do is I'll kind of highlight all the fields that I want to put through the verify and hit the button. I didn't find any validity errors in the data. Let me go back to the paid invoice file, kind of run the, run that same kind of thing of data verify. We'll just kind of click all these fields, see if I can see if I can break it. But okay, so good. I figured I would. What happens is in the paid file, notice there are some fields. So record 691, 692. What's going on? The check date field seems to have a problem, and there were 10 data validity errors. So the first time we ran it, we had no errors. Then I went to a new file, ran it again, and there were 10 errors that came up. And it starts with record 691. So I can go data search 691. I'm brought right there, which is nice. And I can look at that check date and go, it's blank. That's why. So up to that point, there was data in there, and now it's blank. So things like blank dates can throw ACL off as a verification, but I'm not really sure that that's something that you need to actually kind of worry about or concern yourself with. Okay, so continuing on here to other commands. One of the notes that I have is I don't generally use the merge command. So the merge command is one where you're putting two files together, and so that's here. I don't normally use this, and the reason for that is the merge command is, or putting two files one on top of another. So imagine you had paid file for 1995 and paid file for 1996, and you wanted to put them together. So I have kind of, remember we have the over 1996 and smaller here. I can go back to my paid file, and I could say, extract if. I'll do this rather quickly because we've done this, but I could say if the check date is now less than, and we'll change this to 1996-0101. So it's kind of giving us a lot of the kind of before, we'll call this before 1996. Okay, so now I have my 39 records here, and the other one, the over 1996, we had 690 records. And what I tend to do at this point, in order to ensure that everything's going to be okay, is I type the word display in the command line. And what that'll do is it brings up a display of what are those fields that are in this file. So that's my display. I can click that drop-down button, and that will actually hold the display. So that'll kind of hold there. Then I go to before 1996, and I run the same command. And notice here how they're like two totally different files, right? I mean, they have the same fields, I believe, in them. However, this one has a lot more fields in it. So if I try to put like this one together with this one, it's not going to work. So you have to, not only will it not work because the fields are not the same, but the actual lengths of the fields you need to check too. So you have to go General Ledger Ref. That's this first field here. It has a length of 9. You need to go to display and make sure that it has a length of 9. So that's kind of key things that we need to do. So what I normally do instead of merging tables together is I make sure that my display, like we've done here, are the same, or I make sure that I can get the fields to be the same length. And here's what I can do. I can then take the over 1996 and smaller and go data extract fields. Now this has the lesser number of fields in it, right? And I'll do this to a file called merged. Okay, so I have 690 fields in there. I can go back now to my before 1996 file that, remember, had lots of stuff in there, and I can click on my log, and I can say, I can then go on the log and go extract fields again, right? So now I'm going back to that command, but here's the difference. I can click on that dialog box. Here's the difference though. I click on the More button and I click Append to Existing File. So, and the reason I do this in this fashion, like in a manual way, as I probably repeated 5 times here, is I really need to check this before I do it, because if I don't manually check this, it's probably not going to work. Now that I've manually checked it and put them together, voila, everything looks pretty good. I mean, it seems to line up okay. Even these check dates were blank, as we talked about. But the invoice dates, or actually, you're right, the check dates were prior to 1996 because they're blank, and it's showing up as 1900 in ACL. So, good. I mean, it worked, kind of thing. And notice here, these nothing looks sort of off kilter. Okay, so one of the last commands I just wanted to kind of now, or 2 last commands we're going to dive into for the remainder of the session is the join command, so that's one, and then sampling. Whereas everything else, for the most part, we have talked about so far, and as I go through, all of these different menu items, things like applications is when you want to set up a menu in ACL. The tools feature allows you to do some things like, what's the table history of this file? Oh, that's interesting. But I think these are things that are not critical to, running a basic ACL session, getting the server going, etc. All this stuff is kind of, things that you do in a more advanced fashion. Let me go back. Let me kind of switch data files now. And I'm going to go to this May 8th set of data files here for purposes of taking a look at kind of joining things and such. And notice we have a few scripts we'll play with, which is nice. But what I want to do is join together, in this case, the paid invoice file to the vendor master file. Now, there are a couple of different ways to join things. We talked about the indexing to sort things, and that's kind of like index to sort, right? Like the difference between those two. There is something called relating tables. So let me open up the paid invoice file, and I'm just going to show you here relating tables quickly, and then I am going to say we're not going to do much with it today. By taking that paid invoice file, we can click on the vendor master file, and that will kind of come up. And if anyone's ever played with Access, this is something that is something that obviously you can relate to. And what you can then do is kind of click on the vendor number field, and you can then align it to like this vendor number field up here, right? And now that you have that aligned, you can add the fields that are from the vendor master file. So I go to add fields, I go to vendor master file, and I can bring over, say, the vendor name, the vendor address, and that like joins its way into the data. So that's kind of one sort of option. So let me just take a look at this. So let me take now a look at the prior paid invoice file, just to play with something different. I normally don't work with the relationship file or relationships because I am normally joining files together that I'm going to use in my analysis. And I find that the relation, it can get a little complex to remember if I have everything set up right, if I have all the indexes set up right. But in addition to all that, I do find that sometimes it doesn't do a join properly because if fields are not exactly set properly, and it doesn't really tell you that. Whereas in ACL, when you join things together, it will tell you if there's a problem. In the relationship, it's more or less just going to do what it can do, and then you don't really know if it joined it properly or not. So again, I'm a little bit old school, I'll admit that, but I do tend to kind of go back to the join. The problem with the join is that it's going to create a physical file. So in the relationship will not create a physical file. It creates more of like a virtual file in the brain of ACL. But this join command that I'm about to issue actually will in essence join together these two files. So I'm going to carry over from I'm going to show you what we're doing here. We're doing a matched join, and it's going to create another file on my hard drive. And let's just imagine I want to bring over the address, the city, the state, and the zip code to my paid invoice file. So I'm going to do that. In my more options, I'm just going to work with matched records right now. But you could say matched primary, which means I'm starting with my primary file of prior paid invoice of 380 records. If I click on include primary, it's going to make sure that it includes every primary record. If I just go with the matched version, it's only going to figure out which ones match to the vendor file and match them up. Notice here the vendor file has a number 2 next to it in ACL, and the number 1 is next to the prior paid invoice file that we're playing with. And you can see that's the secondary table. I'm joining on the vendor number field. I'm carrying over these fields, and we're going to do this to a physical file on your hard drive called joined. And notice how 2 of the items dropped out, right? So out of 380, 2 of them, disappeared. Interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. But I wanted to kind of show you that is a joined matched feature. So in my log, if I click on the join command, so if I go to log and click on the join command, it tells you, we join this. But then what it did was it tells you if items were bypassed and how many items were bypassed in the process. It created a physical file called join.fil on my hard drive. So with that, let me jump to my next polling question. So which file technique leads to a physical file? Index, relate, stratify, or join? And while that is going, I will take a look at the questions. So again, thank you for answering so quickly. I kind of see a lot of people very, very quickly answering here, so thank you. And taking a look at some of the questions coming in. I see one is a little unrelated to the course, so I'll answer that online here by typing it in here. But yeah, if you have any questions as we go through the course, feel free to note that. Almost everyone's voted, so thank you. I will close that poll so we can continue on here. Bear with me one second. And almost everyone's right there. I mean, actually, the index file does create a small file. You're absolutely right. It's a very small file, though, whereas the join command does create an actual physical file of the final result of that join file, being added together. So let me hide that. What I find is that the join command is something I do urge you to kind of take a look at some of the videos we have, just to supplement what you learned today. And granted, you can watch the video from this class, but I think, we even have some other videos on audit software videos that you'll see under the join command feature that go a little bit further. And, while we're here, I may as well just note that to you, just to kind of quickly show you how I would find stuff if I were you. I would basically say, in ACL, there's, kind of analyzing data and then the data menu itself, so managing data in ACL. If you went to that section, bear with me here, you have kind of a listing of topics over on the left-hand side that gives you an ability to kind of look at what you'd like to learn, and then you can kind of scroll down to the join command, and there are a variety of things. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, you can kind of watch over and over again, if you will, and I do kind of urge you to consider doing that as well, just to further your knowledge, because the join command is one that it eludes a lot of people for a while until they do a few of them, and then it does make a lot more sense to them. Okay, so getting back to other types of join commands, that other options that you may have that are useful. One of the ones that we may as well kind of jump into is taking a look. We had that join feature. We wanted to go to I believe it was the prior paid invoice file where we had 380 items. I can repeat the join that we had a second ago. So let me just kind of join the table to the vendor master file. And we do it on vendor number, and we're going to carry over everything from the primary file, and then the more section I can click on unmatched. So now I'm looking for items that are in here that are not in the vendor master file. So I have payments to people that I don't have a vendor master file record, and we'll call this like unmatched invoices. And at this point, it's showing me the two unmatched invoices. So this, instead of remember we had 380 and it went to 378, and we have these two vendor state-of-the-art computing that for some reason is not coming up, and it's not in my vendor master file. So that would be an example of an unmatched join. And it's usually you do so to try to see if you have any sort of differences between two files. Now, other items that you could take a look for is let's kind of do more of like a vendor master, employee master kind of scenario. Actually, yeah, so let's do that one now. So I'll take the vendor master and I can join that to the employee master. And I can do it, let's say, on the employee address, and we'll do that to the vendor address. And I believe, I think there may be, let's see if they're the same. Yep, they're the same length. And this is something where when you join files together, you really want, even though ACL will try to figure it out, I'm a real believer in trying to make these fields look as exact as possible. And there are a variety of ways of doing that, some of which goes beyond today, but I think for the most part what you want to do is try to make those fields look exactly alike. So if things are left trimmed in field number 1, you want to make sure that they're left trimmed in field number 2. Okay, so then I hit on the primary fields and I carry those over, and then I want to join when and get the employee last name and number when I have a match. In the More section, I'm going to select the Include All Primary because I want to see all of my vendors. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do this to a file called, vendor to employee primary. And it did this join, and it does a pretty good job, and it lines up. Let me just, we have like, let me blow this up for you so you can see it a little bit better. So at this point, if I want to add a field to my view, it's just to my view. It doesn't really add anything. Notice how I have these 2 extra fields added at the end here for the employee info. And I can, in essence, I joined on the address field, and I was trying to see where there was a match. And bear with me 1 second here. What you'll notice here is that there was a match in a few cases, not too many. I mean, of all of them, really, it looks like there's just the one match, which is kind of funny. And it's matching in on that 22 Waverly Place. So that's kind of the one thing that it's matching on. So that is useful as kind of a starting point here. What I wanted to then do is kind of show you how we can then join 2 files together, and I actually have a little script for it. So if you kind of forget how this worked, you can go back to the script. Now what the script is going to do is it's going to go to that point of what I just talked about, of making fields look exactly the same. And again, it's a little bit beyond a 2-hour quick webinar on everything about ACL, but I wanted to give you this so that you could go back to it, and you could kind of see how I took a field and then I only took out, or basically removed, everything but the numbers in that field. Then I did some other analysis where I took the only numbers field and made it only the first 30 characters of that. And then a last thing that I did was I took I believe this is, my understanding that this is, I take the field Z, which I believe is the, when I look back to my dialog, I think that's the actual address field, and it's taking the first 8 characters of that address field, so that's, and it's making it in an upper kind of format. So the reason I'm doing all of this is I wanted to show you what a many-to-many join is. So we just did a join where it's more of just like a match join, and you bring over the primary records. What I then, and we did an unmatched join, and we did a match join. There's all these different options in joining. But this last one is the many-to-many join. And I want to show you this, and I actually, I'm going to go back to my slides for a second, because I feel like the slide that we have for this particular one, I find is even a lot better than what we I can kind of show you. Let me just scroll down here, and this is the many-to-many join here. We talked about that slide there, but just bear with me 1 second. And in the many-to-many join, what can happen whenever you join files together? What ACL tends to do is only join to the first item that it matches to. So it'll match up 7 Wall Street to 7 Sunset Lane, and it stops. And it forgets about the fact that it has 2 other matches down below here in the employee file. right? 7 dimension lane and 7 new star lane. And when I'm matching just on the 7. So again, we were talking about matching on just the numbers in the address. So, again, we're going 7 Wall Street to 7 Sunset Lane. It'll match that. That's the first one, but it kind of misses these two. And so if we do this type of matching under a normal join, we're going to only match up that first one, that first 22 Waverly Place. It doesn't get all the other ones. So let me run this script, and the only thing different that we're doing in the script is we're doing a many-to-many join. So when we, in ACL, in the join command, in the more option, notice you have this many-to-many record. Let me pull a file here so you can see it. But you have this many-to-many matched records. That's the item that we're using. And what that's going to do is ACL is going to match all the items from one file to the other, and it's going to match all the files from the other file to the one. So it's kind of a many-to-many. All right, so let me close that. And let me run this little script, because this is a useful like vendor to employee script. If you need one and you never ran one before, you can select the vendor master file from your file, and then select the employee address file. We could select the vendor address field, and we can select the employee address field. You hit the OK button, close your eyes, and it does a matching. It then tells you that it created a joined file. One of them was called part address match join, which is just, remember how we had the one join on the Waverly Place? There was only, really when you looked at it, there was only like one address that had a very similar actual address field. But then the other file that, it's eluding me as I look at this here, so I'm looking for kind of the address number join, excuse me. So that's where we're looking at the numbers in the address. Notice how the 7 Wall Street didn't just kind of join over to that 7 Sunset Lane, but also now picks up the 7 Dimension Lane and the 7 New Star Lane. So a many-to-many join, if you ever do an employee-to-vendor matching, you have to use many-to-many, or you will not pick up all of the employees. You'll only pick up like the first one that you're matching to. So I really wanted to impress that on you, because I know a lot of you run that report, and I think it is a very valid report to run. All right, so moving off of the join command and very quickly into our sampling aspects of things. Sampling, I'm going to tell you, I'm not an absolute expert in all of statistics and sampling, and what I find is whenever I work with, be it state or federal groups that work with sampling, they have experts that work on this stuff. And sampling is obviously, the practice of selecting individual items from a population, and we're trying to give confidence levels around that item. And what we're trying to do is go to a much more statistical approach. Now, these are the steps in sampling. Walks you through kind of getting a population, figuring out your sampling method, picking a size, etc. Now, we're going to show you how in ACL, how you can not only select a size, but that you could do a random or a fixed interval or even a cell type of function. Now, what I find is that there's the monetary unit as well, which is kind of selecting every dollar unit in that sample, and then in essence, so the dollar itself becomes a sampling unit as opposed to the record being a sampling unit in that particular case. So just kind of continuing on through this, in ACL, or actually, sorry, the stratified samples where you stratify your data and then pick a sample of that strata. So giving you some options there, in ACL, there's kind of I guess there's two different ways of looking at it. You're either going to do a record sample where you pick records, or a monetary unit sample where you pick based on the dollars within that field. So in essence, what you're trying to do is figure out what is your confidence that everything's okay in the file. What is your upper error percentage, or your materiality? It's otherwise known as materiality in the monetary unit sampling. In the upper error rate percentage, it's basically the error rate that you can't go over. So if you say I'm 90% confident, that means you're 10% upper error limit rate. So that's your 10% there. But then you have to or should expect some sort of error. I mean, if you say I have a 90% error with a 10% upper error rate, but I expect absolutely no errors in there at all, from a percentage point of view, it can kind of throw the sample quickly. So I always think it's a good idea to put some expected error rate in there. If you want to work off of an interval in your sampling, you would then put in an interval. Sometimes there's random, where it's not really an interval, like a fixed interval that it's picking off of, but sometimes it is. And then you have the dollar interval, which happens in the monetary unit sampling, where it's literally going to go through your dollars, and it's going to select, say, the first dollar. If you had $10 at the top, it's going to pick, maybe dollar number 4 in there, and then it'll go to a fixed interval of that, like 1,000, and it'll skip down a bunch of lines to the next dollar amount that when you add up all those dollars, you get to $1,000, and then it does another fixed interval of $1,000, but it's using the dollars. And the cool thing about that from a dollars point of view, if you're worried about the dollars being right, is the actual value, like a $1 item has 1,000th less chance of being selected than a $1,000 item. So it actually drives itself more towards larger samples. So with that said, let me kind of launch another polling question here just to keep our polling going. What is the name of the upper error limit in a monetary unit sample? Is it materiality? Is it upper error percentage? Is it confidence? Or is it population? And while you're doing that, I'm just trying to look at the questions. As I know we're getting close to the 1 o'clock hour. I definitely do want to, try to keep on time here. So do appreciate you voting real quickly, and we'll just try to kind of close out the poll in just another couple of seconds here. Okay, let me close that poll, share that poll with everybody. And materiality is the upper error limit for monetary unit samples. I think with sampling, you definitely, if I haven't impressed this enough, I mean, you definitely want to look at or talk to people that are within your organization that have an approach for sampling. A lot of times I'll even work with the external auditors that and utilize their approach as best as I can, put that into ACL as best I can. But I didn't want to make this a statistics course, so I definitely didn't want to, focus too much on this from a, the exact features of from a statistical point of view on sampling. With that said, let's kind of go into the sampling record item here. And there are a couple of different options here, like you could select record sample as an example, and then random. Notice how I have 700 items in the file itself. So this is a real simple kind of way of picking it. I can then put in my size feature 30, just randomly, right? We want to pick 30 and put this to a file called sample 30. And boom, we now have sample 30 kind of showing up here, and it was randomly selected. This is a good time to go to your log, because I kind of like all this other, statistical info of when was the random seed, what was the random seed generated to pull the sample, how many items, where did we start our selection point, etc. So this is stuff that I find the external auditors or whoever's looking at your sample really likes to look at. All right, so let's go back to that file now. Now, let's imagine you didn't know what kind of size of sample you had. So you want a random sample, but you need to pick a size. I normally go at it this way, like I'll get to this point and then I click on size. And now you can kind of put in your 90% confident, your 10% error rate, and maybe 1% expected error rate, and it's coming up with a sample size of 39. And we could play around with this. I wonder if I put in, I think if I put in 0, it comes down to 24. So you're saying, I have no expected errors at all. It's going to lead to a lesser sample, but yet, if you find anything wrong, you're in trouble. If at least I put in here, say 2%, it gives me like some, something to play with when we evaluate the sample, because I'm at least able now to have one tolerable error. So that's good, that I can at least have one wrong out of 39, and I'm not going to blow my sample. Okay, so we'll hit the OK button. That brings the size back to here. In this case, it's random in this case, so it's just going to pick 39, and then we could do this to a file called, sampled, 90% confidence or something like that. Oops. So that will be the OK button there, and then that, selected 39 items. And when we look at the log of that, again, it gives you a lot of nice info around how you got there. I would even say, just to go up one from that, yep, no, didn't put it in the log, so that's not cool. Let me go back to the paid invoice file. In your sampling of records, one of the things we could do is to go to a monetary unit sample, and let's say we want to do that on the invoice amount field. So that's monetary unit sample, invoice amount field. What I can do is go to my size feature here as well, and go through that kind of same process. It's a little bit harder, like the population isn't showing up here, which isn't, helpful. So what I really need to do is consider either running a statistics on the invoice amount field. That's one option. And then what I can do is go to my sampling and go to invoice amount, monetary unit sample, hit my size feature, and now my population does show up, my total value. The confidence in this case, again, you could have 90%. Your materiality might be $1 million, let's say, for the company, and then the expected total errors from again, a dollar point of view that you could put in there as well. But let's kind of keep it at 0 just for fun, and it comes up with a sample size of 7, and that it's set up an interval of 432,000 that it's going to kind of go through the data file and essentially pull at the $432,000 level. So it's going to go through the file, just kind of show you this, as opposed to running it. It's going to go through the actual file itself, and it's going to count up. It's going to start at a random point like here, and it's going to say, okay, starting here, I'm going to kind of scroll down until I get to 432,000 or whatever that amount was, and then it's going to pick that item, and then it's going to do another interval of another 400,000, and it's going to pick that item. So it ends up being about 7 is what ACL kind of calculated there. The last sampling approach I just want to show you, just to kind of throw this out there, is you can have a cell sample as well. A cell sample allows you, in essence, to kind of do a fixed interval, but it'll also calculate a random sample within that fixed interval. So it's like a combination of random sampling and almost like this. Oh, sorry. So I'll go to record, apologize, and cell. So what that does is we're going to pick it on the record here in a cell fashion. We then have an interval that's set up. And what it's in essence going to do is it's not only going to kind of pick an interval of, let's say, 20 records. It's going to go down 20 records. That's the fixed interval. But within those 20 records, it's then going to random sample, for those 20. So it's kind of it's a combination of the fixed interval and the random sample. The fixed interval, again, is literally a fixed interval of like 20 records, 20 records. And I kind of showed you that in the monetary unit sampling, right? So in monetary unit sampling, we talked about the interval being like, $342,000 or something, and it was going to count through. It's basically the same thing. It's just happening at a record level. All right, so I just kind of concluding the day here, I did want to go through the last polling question, but I included a few other slides here in the sampling, just to like for example, some books that you might want to take a look at and some downloads that you could take a look on sampling that might be useful for you. And then from a record sampling point of view, we also talked about some things there, but let me just kind of get to this last question so what sampling technique combines the random sampling with the interval testing? Is it the cell, fixed interval, random, or portioned sample? And as we come up on the top of the hour here, if you do have any questions, please do put that in here, because I've tried my best here to answer these questions as we go. I see that most of you have voted. I'll just give it a couple more seconds here because I don't want to hold you up past the hour. All right, so let me close that poll. I think just give it another second here. Okay, great. So I'll close that poll, share it with everybody. You're absolutely right. The cell sampling is putting together the fixed interval and the random sampling together. Let me kind of hide that and get back to our final slides here. So, all right. We obviously, I've been trying to answer questions as they come in. Feel free to send over any others as we kind of close out today. We did want to note, and many of you have signed up for both, so thank you. We do have the scripting class coming in a couple weeks here, and then some other classes later on ACL, on continuous monitoring. And I wanted to talk about how to set up some really simple continuous monitoring, like getting it going and not making it a really complex thing, but yet getting some real value, like an 80-20 value out of continuous monitoring. Also, pivot tables and graphing for auditors in Excel. If you're exporting your data from ACL into Excel, I do find that pivot tables and graphing is very, very useful as well. But again, I'm kind of looking at questions. I'm not seeing any come in, so I do want to, I do find, as we've noted a variety of times, the sample files will be sent to you. So not only every file that I've talked about today will be sent to you, and in the audit software videos, you can go out there. It is a free subscription. You do need to sign up if you don't have an account already. Many of you have accounts. I know many of your names from the listing, but you just have to sign up for a free subscription, and then you can take a look at the video files at your leisure, and they go into much more depth. So that's something else to consider. And you do have some of the files that are on that website. Not all of the files are being given to you from everything we've done on audit software videos, but everything that you need for this course is out there. So we'll point you to the direction of a few course videos that you might want to take a look at that go into much more depth than we tried to kind of cram into this 2-hour session today. With that said, we do appreciate and thank you for coming today. This is our contact information. If you have any other additional questions that come sort of after the fact here, we definitely feel free to email me.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks everyone for joining us today. This has been great, and those files will be available to you. Rich will make them available, and you also will be getting your CPE certificates and the link to the recording. So watch for that. That will be coming in an email. And if we have no further questions, I wanted to wish you all a good day, and thank you again, Rich, for sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And I do want to note that email will come in about 5 days. We'll try to be quicker. I'll really even try to get it out, in the next 2 days. But yeah, just so for those that do want that email in a day or so, we'll do our best. But it may take 3 to 4 days.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks
Have a great day, everyone.